Welcome to the Retirement Roadmap by SHP Financial, a podcast empowering today's retirees and pre-retirees to make well-informed financial decisions that will help you spend more time living and dreaming than worrying and wondering. Are you ready to get started? Let's go. Welcome, everyone, to another edition of SHP Financial's Retirement Roadmap podcast. I'll be your host, Matthew Peck. Do you know what WEP is? Do you know what GPO is? My guess is that you know that some of the provisions in Social Security has changed and in your favor. Maybe you don't know. Maybe you just got a random check. But one of the bigger changes that came to Social Security just happened in 2025, and we want to make sure that everyone knew about it. Everyone knew the impact, both short-term and long-term. We want to make sure that everyone's getting their checks because benefits have changed, and they have changed in your favor, especially if you fell under these WEP and GPO. Now we're going to talk about all these acronyms and abbreviations in a second. So that's why I actually have my acronym and abbreviation expert here with me. His name is Chase Reardon. He's been with SHP now for over 5 years, and obviously is a recurring guest on the show. But welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matt. It's always good to be back.
Oh, absolutely. And so, all right. So this is what I want to talk about. All joking aside about the acronyms and whatnot, but this is Social Security, and Social Security has just undergone, maybe not the biggest change in a decade or whatever that may be, because there's constant changes. There's file and suspend, there's a couple other things, but it was a significant change, and it's relatively hot off the presses. Yeah. Right? So Chase, why don't you walk our clients through what happened and what's the impact?
Yeah. So Matt, to your point, it's like this was a major thing that happened. And the reason why is because it actually puts more money in people's pockets. And to talk a little bit about what WEP actually is. So WEP is what's called the Windfall Elimination Provision. And what it is, it was signed into law in 1983. And what it did was it actually removed a portion of your Social Security if you were due a pension through the civil service. So the reason the government did that, though, was because they thought, in their calculations, and, I understand why they did it, but I'm not going to necessarily agree with it. What they said is, if you were due a pension through civil service and you didn't pay into Social Security all these years, but you did qualify, you're technically earning a little bit more than if you were on Social Security for the entire time. So, like, to put it in easy terms, it's like you have someone who's working for 30 years, and for 20 of the years they're paying their civil service, and then 10 years they're paying into Social Security. Well, what happened was once they retired, they would say, okay, we're taking a calculation off your pension and we're reducing your Social Security by that portion. So what they said was it's considered a windfall because if you take the same 30 years of a person in the private sector, they wouldn't be due as much in terms of a guaranteed benefit in whole. So what they said was in 1983, they decided to get rid of that and now reduce your Social Security moving forward when you went to go to collect it, in some cases actually getting completely rid of it. Right. So most people, when they look at WEP applies to you as the filer. The GPO, which is the second piece that Matt was kind of talking about, applies mostly to just spousal benefits, which we'll get into in a second. But that's kind of the history, is why they set it up. And the reason they really repealed it this year was because they want to put more money in people's pockets. There was major, talk and, even protests about people saying, well, I paid into it. I'm due that amount. It's an insurance contract with the government, and the government for a long time was reducing those people's benefits. So that's really what came to light at the end of the last administration. They really pushed forward this and signed it into law this year, and people are already getting their checks.
Which is amazing too, and I'll sort of the fact that any type of bipartisan bill is passed is usually pretty noteworthy itself and newsworthy itself. But let me also really clarify who this impacts. This is generally speaking, and I'll list off a couple in my head. Kind of like firefighters and teachers and police officers and anyone that is a town worker, because you call it like civil service, right? Yeah. So town workers, city workers, teachers, yeah. I always sometimes I think of it in regards to like firefighters, right? They'll do their 224s, whatever that may be. and then they'll suddenly have 3 or 4 days a week that they're not on and they're not at the station. So let's just say they have a side gig, right? Let's say they paint houses on the side, or I don't know,
or cut trees, or
landscaping, right? It's a great point. I mean, who knows, right? And so now this firefighter is paying. He's part of and I'll say the city of Boston, where I'm from. Go Dorchester. That's right. It's no Lakeville, I know.
Oh yeah. Okay.
No, it's no Lakeville, but it's not too bad. But let's just say, work for the city of Boston. Obviously, fighting fires, saving lives, and then on the side, does some landscaping. So now this individual is part of the city of Boston's pension, but on the landscaping side, that little side gig, he's paying FICA taxes, he's paying Social Security taxes, he's paying W-2, and he's paying into Social Security. And so now, after doing both jobs for 30 or 40 years, whatever that may be, he then he qualifies for Social Security. However, because of the old rules, which we'll talk about the new rules, but the old rules were that his Social Security was basically almost made non-existent or wiped out because of the WEP provision. Is that a good story to kind of share with how it worked originally? Yeah,
I mean that's a great point, and that's I've seen that in action. I've also seen a lot of the folks that I've been meeting with. I do have a lot of teachers that I work with, and a lot of them have been teachers for 20, 30 years. I mean, they're career teachers, and they love what they do. And prior to teaching, maybe they a lot of them did work in the private sector, and they did accrue good amount of Social Security, and they did qualify. It takes 40 credits or 10 years to qualify for Social Security. It doesn't have to be, like Matt said, all in a row. It can be staggered. As long as you got those 40 credits, those 10 years, you will qualify. So a lot of the folks that I have that are teachers had qualified for Social Security. So the major discussion was around retirement was, how is the WEP provision going to impact my Social Security? And it was going to be a calculation that we'd have to do and run them through their plan and say, okay, your Social Security is going to be reduced by X amount. And now it's a lot of that's kind of weight's been lifted off our shoulders, and of course the family's shoulders, because that no longer applies to them. They're due the full amount, which we can talk about in a second. But that's more of like a common scenario I've been seeing a lot, especially with the teachers.
Well, it's a great point. Yeah. So because I'm thinking about a guy or a gal who is doing sort of 2 jobs simultaneously. Right. But to your point is, imagine you're in the private sector for 20 years. So from let's say from your when you're 20 to 40, you're in the private sector, and then right around 40 to say, what, you want to give back, you want to be a teacher, you want to be this. So then from 40 to 60, let's say, now you're in the public sector as a teacher or whatever that is. Right. And so those 20 years that you had spent in the private sector were completely wiped out. Right. And you were saying, Chase, it was something, this weird like calculation where it was like 2/3 reduced, and I don't know if you even have what that old formula was.
Yeah, yep. So the formula, I mean, it's not it's not too The really what happened was, it was 2/3 of the pension that you were due is where they took that 2/3 and they docked it off your Social Security, basically. So in some cases, depending on how much Social Security you had, to Matt's point, it was either reduced by a good chunk or it was completely gone.
Yeah.
So, and that was a major kind of hurdle in every conversation that we would have with these folks, is that, they were somewhat upset. Their Social Security, the first thing they say is, I paid into it and I'm not getting it, right? And that was really where this push to this, signing this bill came into effect.
Yeah, because like back, in 83 or whatnot, they considered it double dipping. They said, look, you're part of 2 separate pension systems, and we're only going to pay you one.
Right.
And it was a form, I'm actually going to get super nerdy on you here, Chase, because, this was part of like Reagan and...
Lay it on me, Matt.
This was like Reagan and Tip O'Neill. I mean, this was, because Tip O'Neill was a local politician, and but he was the head of the House of Representatives, and this was a sort of a massive sort of bipartisan bill back in the day to help preserve and restore and extend Social Security. And so honestly, like Chase, one of my bigger concerns when I heard that they passed this law, I was like, okay, that's absolutely fair. I think they actually called it like the Fairness Act or something along those lines. I mean, it's absolutely
Social Security Fairness Act. Yeah.
Is that okay? Yeah. But because it makes complete sense to me because, as you were saying, Chase, I mean, people paid into the system. You know, they paid in. They paid taxes. I mean, they are owed these benefits, and then to have the benefits, completely, eliminated or considered double dipping and things like that are certainly reduced was blatantly unfair. Right. At the same time, I'm just worried about Social Security. I mean, have they talked anything about, because Social Security right now is like projected to go bankrupt in 10 years, or what impacts does that have on the long-term strength of Social Security? Do you know?
Yeah, so that's a good point, Matt. And I did a lot of looking into this, and the current estimate right now as it stands is Social Security, the fund, is supposed to reach what we call a break even, where money going in is money going out as well to Social Security, right? Because the Social Security is funded, like Matt was talking about, through the FICA payroll. So what happens is there's a fund right now, it's existing almost like a bank account. And right now, like Matt said, over the next 10-ish years, that bank account is going to get drawn down to where it will reach a break even where the money that's going in is going out and there's no surplus. So right now, the current estimate is 2034, 2033, 2034, depending on how you look at it. Now, to Matt's point, this is putting this repeal of the bill is putting more money in people's pockets. So therefore, it naturally will strain the system. I haven't seen any new estimates of what it would be, and I'm not going to throw a number out there by any stretch of the imagination, but it will put stress on the system. So over the next, whether it's the current administration or the next administration, there will need to be some sort of, I don't want to say saving grace, but there's going to be some sort of work that needs to be done to help extend the life of this year.
No, for sure. And I think too, I look forward, and we'll probably have you back on when they release that, because I know they release it annually, and so we'll sort of see what the impact has. Yep. Let me go back to day to day though. So you mentioned that literally, or let me back up. Yeah. So client is what was impacted by WEP. They passed this law. And then what happens? Did they have to file for the extra money? Did they have to notify Social Security? I want to make sure that everyone's listening that may have been impacted is getting paid. Right.
So they rolled it out, honestly, quicker than expected from a lot of people. So the original projection was it was gonna take a year to roll out for people that have already filed for Social Security and want to, now that the WEP is repealed. People that have already filed, there was a lot of confusion on, am I going to have to fill out a form? Am I going to have to call Social Security? They made it very clear pretty much from the get-go that there's going to be no work that the family or the individual is going to have to do. It's more or less when was it going to happen. So the original projection was it was going to take a year to fully roll out, but they actually fast-tracked it. And as of now, I think it's like 99% completion of. There was nothing you had to file. There's nothing you have to do. All you have to do is, as long as you file Social Security and you've been collecting, the government knows this, and they're already sending checks out, and people have already gotten 2-3 checks that they've been due. Now the good catch here is that they did pay retroactively from January of last year. So if you've received a lump sum payment or a series of elevated payments, that's because they retroactively started paying people from January of 2024. That was really more of the hotter debated topics with this, is how far do they retroactively pay? Right. So if you're filing and you filed and you've been collecting, there's nothing that anybody needed to do. No need to call. It was just government took the initiative and started paying people.
Interesting. Okay. And so to be clear, no one needs to take any actions. They got a check. And the checks went back, they were retroactive to 2024. So it's not like it went back to 2000 and you were collecting for 20 years and you're going to get paid for all those 20 years. It was just sort of 1 year worth of payments?
Right, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it would have been nice if they went a little more low.
Well, yeah, and then probably bankrupt Social Security a little bit too soon. I know. It's going to find a happy balance there. Yeah. Okay, so there's the WEP, and then there's also something called the GPO. And same bill, same impact. And so what's the GPO and what role does that play?
Yeah, so the GPO stands for Government Pension Offset, and that's sometimes where more of the confusion lies is, what is the GPO and how does it affect me? Well, they repealed both the WEP and the GPO. The GPO mainly targets spousal benefits, spousal and survivor benefits. So with that being said, is now since the repeal of WEP and GPO is completely off the table now, it doesn't exist anymore. So whatever you're due from a Social Security on the website, you are entitled to get. And on the GPO side, on the spousal side, that's where we begin to have the conversation of collecting half my spouse's.
Okay.
So as a spouse, and say, okay, most of the folks that might have been in civil service and don't have, maybe particularly large Social Security payments compared to their spouse that's been in the private sector, the spousal option is now on the table. So in full capacity. So as an example, like if you're looking at your Social Security statements and you're saying, okay, well, I'm due X amount of dollars, I'm due $500 at my full retirement age. Well, if you go to say, okay, well, I'm going to look at my spouses now because the GPO has now been repealed, it puts full spousal benefits on the table. You can now say, okay, well, if I take half my spouse's 50% at my full retirement age, half my spouse's might be $1,000. Mm-hmm. So that just gave you a $500 a month increase in pay.
Okay.
So you can't take a full 50%. I'm getting a little nerdy on you here, Matt.
Yeah.
You can't take a full 50% of the Social Security until your full retirement age of your spouse. So that's.
But I guess, but before they couldn't do that. So I
guess
reduced.
It was reduced.
Yeah. Talk to me about what was it before? So a spouse said, no, I'm not going to file because I'm not going to get that much. And now it's in play, I'm just curious, like compare and contrast between the old system and the new system.
Yeah. So old system, to keep it simple, is your amount was reduced quite heavily.
So you the spousal benefit. That's what I want to make sure. Okay.
Exactly.
So now husband and wife. Wife was more, sort of a full-time mom and was thinking like, okay, or was the wife the one that had the GPO offset?
The wife had the GPO offset. She was say a teacher for a long time.
Got it. Oh, I see.
Yeah,
got
yep.
it. Okay.
And she said, okay, so she's looking at her annual statements that they send in the mail. They don't send them in the mail anymore.
Right.
And she's saying, okay, well, if I'm due $500 a month at my full retirement age, which most people say call it 67 years old, and if she collected her spouse's, say $1,500 or whatever the number is, say if we're taking half the spouse, say the spouse is collecting $3,000 and she's due 50%, that'd be $1,500. But in the old ways, the GPO would severely reduce that to where it didn't even make sense to collect half your spouse's.
And it was the old way, that same idea of like 2/3 reduction.
Yes.
So GPO was like, so it's really just like WEP and WEP was for the person that actually had the pension. GPO was the spousal, impacting the spousal benefits.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And now, since it's completely repealed, it's all off the table now. So now it's I guess fire at will with Social Security and how we collect it. How we collecting is a different story, because we talk about the income streams and is it beneficial to collect earlier versus later? When there's retirement, do you still plan on working and things like that? But the main goal with the GPO is that now your spousal benefit is on the table. So I'm already having these discussions with folks where it's like, it's kind of the similar example. I'm due to collect X amount. Is it now that I can collect half my spouse's or up to half my spouse's, does it make sense to collect off of theirs, right? Yeah. And that's kind of a major conversation I've been having.
No, I could see that, Chase, because think of it this way, right? On one hand, the people that were impacted by WEP, they're already in the Social Security system, and so they so automatically got a check. And for those folks, the ones that were had the pension or did the civil service and private service, right? They when the law was repealed or whatever you want to call it, they didn't need to take any action because they just saw their checks get increased and the WEP provision was done away with. The GPO might be slightly different though, because let's say you're a spouse and you never filed because you just said, you know what, why bother filing if I'm not going to get anything? So there might be some spouses out there that would need to take some action. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would definitely. It always helps especially with spousal benefits, to call them and ask and kind of walk through the scenario with the representative, because a lot of the spousal information is really all of it is not going to be available online. So, and that applies to spousal benefits, survivor benefits, a divorce benefit. You're filing off, an ex-wife or an ex-husband and things like that.
Right, yeah.
A lot of that information will not be online. So the recommendation there would definitely be to call Social Security and just tell them the situation, and obviously talk to your advisors and say, okay, does it make sense to once we gather the information, say, okay, here are the numbers at the different ages. Do we wait to collect? Does it fit in my plan now? Do we want to wait and get a little bit of a higher benefit because you won't get that full 50% until your full retirement age? So that's a bigger misconception out there is if I'm 62, I can collect and start immediately collecting half of my spouse's, which is not the case. It's a reduced amount until your full retirement age.
Got it. Okay.
So my recommendation would be to call Social Security because they do a good job online. The online platform for Social Security is pretty good, but it's pretty much limited to just your information. So that would be the recommendation.
Okay. Yeah. So, and I guess to kind of broaden it a little bit, I mean, just 'cause I'm curious about, your sort of day to day and with clients, with the repeal or non-repeal of the main topic. Are people going earlier? Are you seeing 62? Are you seeing 65? Are you seeing 67? Like, what do you, I know every situation is unique. Don't get me wrong, but in general, when do you recommend people take Social Security?
That's a good question, Matt. So a lot of the conversation comes down to a couple of different things, right? The first one is does it fit in your income plan is the number one goal here, right? If it fits in your income plan and you're 62, by all means, fire away, right? If it fits in your income plan and you want to delay it till 70, then that's the idea, and that's what you're comfortable with. But most of the time, a major factor we're looking at is, do you plan to continue to work while collecting? Because that will really determine, and if so, how much, right? Because that will determine, really when maybe you should start collecting based on how much you make. Because if you do collect before your full retirement age, which for most folks it's either 66 and 6 months all the way up to 67.
It's just easier to say 67.
67.
I know it's not official because some of them are.
Some slack, Matt.
It's just like that whole 66 in a couple months. I know it's real. Don't get me wrong. Chase is absolutely right. Where sometimes some people it's 66 in 3 months, sometimes 66 in 8 months, sometimes 66, and it's like I just there's, as you can tell, the government is not exactly the most convenient agency in the whole wide world there. But for this argument, we'll just say 67. Check your own date of births. It is it might not be 67, but just for simplicity's sake, let's go with 67.
Yeah. So if you decide to collect before 67, full retirement age in this example, what happens is you are capped on how much you can make before they start penalizing your Social Security. So, some families will say, oh, well, no, Chase, I want to continue to work at least part-time or maybe even full-time, but I want to start collecting around 65 for whatever reason. Well, the problem with that is when you start collecting and you still continue to work, the current law right now is about $22,000 a year to where they start penalizing your Social Security. So in that instance, maybe it makes sense to delay. But like in an example where it's like 65 is kind of the golden, some sort of like the golden number for retirement people think of because of you're eligible for Social Security. That's where Medicare kicks in. Now you have your health insurance covered and your health expenses covered. 65 can be a beneficial age where you're looking at, okay, do I continue to delay it a little bit more? And that obviously comes down to, the withdrawal rates in the portfolio. How's the market doing? I mean, there's many different factors that can go into that. But all in all, it's like, what's the break even? Because everyone talks about the break even with Social Security. And if we're looking at a break even, we've done, Matt, at this point, probably thousands of analysis on Social Security and break evens. The average break even, because there's a lot of folks out there that will say, I'm delaying until 70, which is fine. But if we're looking at a break even between the full retirement age, 67 or 70, the break even is usually around 80 to 82 years old, to where the 70-year-old payment, the latest delay credit, actually pulls ahead in total dollars paid. So, we're not doctors obviously here, right? But if longevity does run in the family, right, and you are relatively healthy, it could pay off waiting if it's doable, obviously in your situation, to garner that higher payment, and that payment will then pass on if it's the higher payment to your spouse if you pass away. So it can be seen as kind of like almost like a hedge, a long-term hedge, and if your spouse is younger, it might be more beneficial to delay. But if the break even is around 80 to 82, that full retirement age piece of it, that age is important, because it's like you can still continue to work. You've basically almost maxed your benefit. It does grow after that, but that's really seen as like your biggest benefit pretty much until obviously you're age 70. So yeah, that's really conversations that we're having with that Social Security piece is, what's your income need? Do you plan to work? Look at the break evens. Look at the overall income situations. Are there other pensions or other income streams on the table? Does it make sense to defer one or take it now? Those are some of the conversations that we're having.
Well, and I certainly want to go back to the work piece of that, and also because you mentioned earlier a term that I want to make sure people understand, which is called the withdrawal rate. Because on the work aspect of it, I have seen people take Social Security early if they are completely done working. Like if they're done at 62, 63, and they have no intention of entering back into the workforce, right? In that situation, if they are then withdrawing, back to the whole idea of withdrawal rates, if they retire at 62 or 63, and they start to heavily withdraw from their portfolios from 62 to 67, right, for 5 years, then there's sort of like long-term damage to the portfolio over time, to the plan over time, because they took all those heavy withdrawals from 62 to 67.
Right.
You tracking?
Right.
And so that goes to withdrawal rate, and that goes to how much are we spending? Because the other interesting thing about that stage is that's usually an early retirement, or when clients first retire, is when they're spending the most money. Right. Well, that's where like, all right, let's go. But like I got my bucket list and I'm doing this, this cruise and this trip and doing, which is great. That's exactly what it should be. But same idea. If they have like these heavy withdrawal rates and no other money's coming in,
right.
Then then to repeat the first point, that they are completely done working. They're not going back into the workforce. Then when we've been running some of the break-even analyses, it's better to take it early,
right?
Because you need to sort of help plug that gap and prevent kind of long-term damage. And the other thing I would add too is the mental aspect, right? It's scary when you first retire and there's no money coming in.
Right.
Now I could say, hey Chase, don't worry, I'm going to set you up in this annuity or this dividend stream. I'm going to send you money every month or every quarter. Don't you worry, the portfolio is going to work for you.
Right.
But still, there's that like, but I'm used to a paycheck. I'm used to some type of. It's like, well, don't worry, Chase. I can recreate this paycheck for you. I can do this. I can do that. But there's that mental sort of stress that. In just that comfort level, right. So that's what I just wanted to really kind of isolate that, sort of not unique, but that the situation where client retires at 62, no intention of ever going back,
right,
and has a heavy withdrawal rate early on. Then some of these runs, some of these analysis and models and projections that we build out show people that it's better to take a little bit earlier.
Right, and especially that's also not even realizing where the market's going to be, at 62. Because it's like, if you're 55 and you're saying, all right, well, I want to trigger Social Security at 62. Well, that's 5, if my math's correct, that's 7 years away if you're 55 years old. You don't know where the market's going to be in 7 years, but but what you do know is you're going to be spending a lot of money.
Right.
So if the market's not doing well, I mean, that even just exacerbates the fact that triggering Social Security, to your point, Matt, would be beneficial, because it's like now you have to start selling at potentially, depending on how you're invested, at losses and things like that. That Social Security income stream can really kind of add a little bit of comfort to that. So
well, and I think too, and I'll kind of go back to my scenario. It just to kind of expand on a little bit. It just always fascinates me what sort of people want to do. I mean, I've had some people work 70, 75 years old because they really still enjoy it, and some of it's their sort of social that's their social outlet, right? Not just being productive and at work and making money, of course, but also they like the guys and gals they work with, right? Then you have other people that just are just done, right? They say, "Yep, I'm done," and they, as I said, they have no intention of ever going back,
right?
And whether it's travel or hobbies or whatever that may be, and I appreciate the variability there, right? And some people love work and love what they do. Other people just say, "Look, I worked my what off, and I can't wait to not work, anymore." And that just goes back to the unique situation, right? And to kind of tie back into WEP and GPO, I mean, now that's kind of leveled the playing field a little bit, where we used to do a whole lot more work to a certain extent, right? Because we used to do all the calculations to say, okay, hey, here's your impact here. Right. Now, I mean, that sort of simplifies things a little bit, which is great. Right. But I still enjoy the everyone's unique situation and building a Social Security plan and building an income plan for their needs.
Right. No, I hear you, Matt. I mean, I think that this is what they've done here with the WEP GPO repeal. I think it puts, simplest way to put it, puts money back in people's pockets. And now it's like we can have an additional conversation of, okay, we have another lever here that we can pull in the plan that now benefits you and gets more money in your pocket. So now going back to the original conversations, like now we start talking about the spousal benefit aspect of it. Now maybe we talk about your benefit of it relating to WEP, and it's like, okay, do we have that full-blown Social Security conversation that we didn't think we were going to have with you for at least a while, right? Because of this repeal. So yeah.
Well, and I think it goes back to when we talk about the different analyses and break-even scenarios and all that stuff. I just love the value that we're able to offer and give to clients, so that when they do eventually make that decision, it's been a well-researched decision. We've crunched all those numbers. We have made sure the fact that they know the break-even age. I mean, because every break-even age is a little bit different based on their situation, and so I think I just love being able to, because it's a one-time decision, and you're not going to file for Social Security and then 5 years later say, you know what, I want to change, right? I want to delay it, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. It really is a major decision that you don't want to get wrong, and you never know. As I said, we're not doctors, so who knows what the future holds in that sense. But you just want to be able to make it confidently, to know that you looked at it from every different angle and every different facet to say, yes, I think this one works for me. And so again, just love being able to offer that value there. Right. Are there other areas of the on the provisions that people should be aware of, or other changes to Social Security?
No, I mean, there's really not a whole lot to it. I mean, it's, to put it very simply, the GPO no longer exists. So, I mean, it's really important to just understand that, okay, now my full numbers are on the table. Let's begin the work to run the break-even analysis, to run it through your plan. Now that we have full-fledged capability of doing that, because of the fact that you're due all the amounts. Now, in terms of a couple different questions we usually get asked, is usually the first one that we get asked is, where can I find my Social Security benefits, right? Which is, I mean,
it's a good place to start.
It's a good place to start.
I won't lie, great question.
And they don't send you the statements anymore. Right. So every meeting I have with folks are like, oh, they didn't send me. You got to log in at ssa.gov is the website.
SSA.gov.
SSA.gov.
Got it.
You can log in there. You'll have all your information on there. Again, the spousal information if you're looking in regards to your spouse or an ex-spouse, it really won't be on there. That's when you should call. But usually we get, okay, how do I locate it? SSA.gov for my up and coming new Social Security filers. Now that this is off the table, that's where I'd find it. And there's a couple other questions here. I mean,
give them all. Everyone, they're asking these questions, Chase.
Right.
So let's give them to them.
Right. So another common one we get is, can my Social Security increase if I continue to work? Now, this is a good one because I get this one a lot. And that answer is yes. If you are at your full retirement age and, you're still making, quote unquote, good money, right? Where it's pretty much the same as it was before, or it's the exact same, or maybe it's a little less, or maybe it's even a little bit more. Social Security takes your highest 35 years of earnings. So if those years fall as high earning years, you will get that added benefit. So that's one I get very commonly is will my Social Security go up? It will not go down. It will not go down if you have less earning years. So it's like, if you're making money, you're doing well at your job and everything, and then all of a sudden you go part-time and you're collecting. It's not like the calculation the average gets drawn down, right? That's not what happens. So if anything, it'll stay the same, or if you make good money, it will go up. So that's a common question I get as well.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. And then any other FAQs that we want to leave our audiences before we wrap up?
No, I think that's really it. It's interesting to see when that annual report comes out of the new calculation of the fund, which we'll probably be watching very closely, and we'll be communicating that as we meet with our folks. But I'm glad they passed this, put more money in people's pockets, and I'm glad that's the case.
Well, and also again the fact that they simplified it, right? All those 2/3, and who falls under the WEP provision, who falls under the GPO provision, and spousal benefits versus personal benefits and things along those lines. Anything that they can do to simplify the system, I'm certainly a big fan of, to say the least. Right. And Chase, we'll definitely have you back on once the new sort of trust fund, once the most upcoming one, which will probably be later on this year, we'll have you back on, and then we'll continue on to talk about the impact of WEP and just the vital role that Social Security plays in the foundation of a retirement income plan, right? And making sure that you make that decision right, and making sure that we have a handle of how much you have there, and making that Social Security selection, and checking on pension selections if they're there, and how to build an income plan, because it's a building block, and understanding how that building block works and understanding how to maximize that building block is something that we do every single day. Right. And so hopefully for all of our listeners, you get an idea of today of how we're staying on top of it, and we'll continue to stay on top of it on behalf of you and your family and everyone that we know. So thank you so much for lending us your ears, and be well.
Thanks for listening to the Retirement Roadmap podcast by SHP Financial. If you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button so future episodes are automatically downloaded directly to your device. And if you've liked what you heard, please share the show. Create your own little ripples so we can help even more people with their retirement goals. If you want access to all past interviews, including notes, resources, and exclusive content from SHP Financial, visit shpfinancial.com/podcast. Thanks again for joining us on the Retirement Roadmap podcast. And for all the attorneys out there, and disclaimers and disclosures, I'm just going to put on my super serious voice and add our own. No statements made during the Retirement Roadmap podcast shall constitute tax, legal, or accounting advice. You should consult your own legal or tax professional on any such matters. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk, and unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Our investment advisory services are offered through SHP Wealth Management, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Insurance sales are offered through SHP Financial, LLC. Our advisors and insurance reps may offer clients advice and/or products from each entity. No client is under any obligation to purchase any insurance product.